Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another Epic Chat. So today we're talking to Yves Sisteron from Upfront Ventures about sustainability. My name is Jennifer Shu, and I am the head of US development at Epic Foundation. We fight to change the lives of disadvantaged children and youth around the world through our portfolio of high-impact organizations, and we really hope you'll join us. Now, don't forget, today's Epic Chat will include an opportunity to ask our special guest your burning questions during the AMA. So we really want to hear from you. Please drop your questions in the questions tab or upvote the ones that you really want to see answered. And with that, over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Good morning, the US, and good afternoon, Europe. Thank you for being here with us from all over the world. My name is Jonathan, and I have the privilege to head up Epic in France. We are really excited to welcome Yves today on Epic Chat. Most of you already know him as the managing partner and the co-founder of Upfront Ventures, on which you will be able to ask any questions in a few minutes. But Yves is also one of our amazing and major supporters at Epic. You have been invited here today because you are in some way related to Epic, or for most of you are already an Epic pledger, and we thank you for that. The Epic pledge, for the people who don't know that, is a promise to give a percentage of your success as an investor, as an entrepreneur, or even as a corporation, and to do it to social good, whether it be through a bit of your exit or carried interest or even management fees. The Epic pledge is not legally binding, so this is essentially a promise to yourself that if you succeed, you will give a little back to others who are more vulnerable. So as you see, it's pretty simple and it has a huge impact on children and youth. Now, as many of you know, at Epic, we are all about giving back. For each webinar of our series, the speaker chooses one organization of our tremendous portfolio organization, all of which have demonstrated high impact in their program and are really willing to help vulnerable children and youth all around the world. For today, Yves has chosen to support SNEHA, which stands for Society for Nutrition, Education, and Health Action, which works to improve the health and safety of more than 300,000 children, youth, and women living in the most vulnerable urban slum communities in Mumbai, India. We'd love you to join us and to donate whatever you can, because as you know, every little bit helps. And we have just learned something exceptional, that Yves will be doing a donation today for SNEHA of $10,000. So Yves, thank you very much for this very big and incredible news. So as you see, you should have a pop-up on your screen going up right now over here. Don't be worried, you can click on it. You will not be sent out of this chat. You will be able not only to donate, but also to hear to us, to listen to us. So, well, I am sure and I hope that you will be enjoying the discussion. And now it's back to you, Jennifer. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Yves, thank you again for your very generous donation. It'll go a long way to supporting the children and youth that SNEHA is working with in India. So it's going to be a lot of ground that we're covering today between food supply and crypto. So I want to dive right in. So Upfront Ventures has raised incredibly over $2 billion across 10 funds. And you've invested in hundreds of innovative tech companies over the past 25 years. So while you've made investments in AI, in software, in lots of different verticals, sustainability is a topic that's particularly close to your heart. And so I'm wondering, in all the years that you've made your investments, what are some that you're particularly proud of, or that you're excited about right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would be probably not wanted to review all the investments of the last 30 years, but more recently, I personally have been more focused as one of the partners at Upfront with sustainability investments and particularly around food security. I mean, you have to make some choices sustainability is such a broad area anyway that, and I see a lot of different things in energy and biomaterials and all kinds of things. But so far, the investments I've made in that space have been around food and food security. So we funded a company in Santa Barbara maybe 6-7 years ago called Apeel Sciences, or just Apeel, APEEL. And basically what it is a method for extending the shelf life of fruits and vegetables. So if you think about fruits and vegetables around the world, $2.5 trillion of production, roughly, and about 40% of it is wasted at every level. Wasted at the farm, wasted in the trucks, wasted in the distribution centers, wasted in the supermarkets, and then eventually wasted on the consumer table. And if you think about feeding 9 billion people by 2050, the first thing that we should do is to just save what we produce rather than trying to produce more, knowing that the yields are diminishing, that it's getting harder to get the yield that we need, that climate change will affect regions and shift, areas where this would grow or that would grow. But if you just are able to extend the shelf life, that makes a big difference. And this company is now global. We have operations in Europe, in the United States, in Asia, in Africa, and we're going to make a real difference. And that's part of it also is hard to find in sustainability is things that can scale globally and can have a global impact. You can find a lot of local projects, and that's great, by the way. You want thousands of local projects, but in terms as investor, what I need to find is things that I can really deploy globally. Because obviously, if you want to make investments in sustainability, you also need it to succeed financially. Absolutely. Otherwise, you can't raise money to do it anymore. So that's kind of the situation. And then I also did, in a similar fashion, a company in Paris called Insect with a Y, and their the goal is to essentially produce alternative proteins out of insects. There's several categories of insect. The one in Paris is using something called a beetle called a mealworm, which is a very effective protein. And the key market initially really is to feed fish in fish farms, because what people don't know, a lot of people don't know, is that if you are about half of the fish in the world is consumed, comes from fish farms around the world. It's only increasing. As you all know, the ocean's supply is diminishing, by every year. And fish farm eventually will probably be maybe the majority, if not all, of the consumption of fish. And right now, those fish farms consume fish for the growth of their own fish supply. So essentially, trawlers that rake the bottom of the oceans for anchovies and then make a paste out of it and feed it to fish farms. And that's 44 million tons a year of supply to these things. So what we did is to create a protein out of insects that we are now scaling in a big way with very large factory. We're in construction in the north of France with a very large factory, like several football fields, 90 feet high, and entirely automated, and that's where our IP is. And so it's fascinating. It's again something that can really have a massive effect. And I just saw that Alexandre said that the insect founders are also epic pledgers. So I didn't know that. I'm pretty happy about that. So we're in the same company.
Thank you so much for sharing about these two investments. I'm sure, you could go on for hours about all of the sustainable investments that you've made over the past 20, 25 years. So going back to the first startup that you mentioned, Apeel, so you invested in them at the seed stage, and now they've raised, $400 million. I think Gates Foundation invested in them as well. IFC, the International Finance Corporation, which works in emerging markets, is working with you to bring their technology to Africa. And so that's really exciting.
And then the last round was the government of Singapore, GIC.
And GIC is also a big investor. And so it's great to see, to your point, these ideas scale to international markets, to more people in the world, to ultimately reduce food waste. And then the second one, Insect. So Antoine was the first founder that we had come speak on the Epic Chat webinar. So it's nice to see more folks from the ecosystem here. I also noticed that Insect raised $400 million to scale their solution. So there's a small world moment. And Robert Downey Jr., if any of you didn't know, has his own investment fund and actually co-invested with you in Insect's robotic farm. So it's very fitting that Iron Man is supporting this amazing idea. And then I also learned.
And let me tell you that what's extraordinary about him is that once he makes an investment like this, and he's very active, and particularly, he has a huge following on various social media platforms, as you might imagine, tens and tens of millions of people, and he tweets or posts, on Instagram about Insect and what we do, and it's had an enormous impact on people's perception. Saying, "Oh my God, this is interesting," and this, it's been very valuable to have him invest with us. Yeah,
absolutely. And then Oprah and Katy Perry invested in Apeel, so it's nice to see this superpower.
Yeah, well, don't forget
these ideas.
Our fund is located in Los Angeles, so we're in proximity to Hollywood and that whole scene. And we host also an annual summit. Alexandre knows well about that, and that summit, that summit is kind of a cross section between the tech of the Silicon Valley and Hollywood, and we bring a lot of times people, stars who can help with, and who are interested in what we do, and can help with their following, promote the right
so
company.
All of you heard it here. If you're able and lucky to be in Upfront Ventures portfolio, you might meet some superstars. So you mentioned your team is based in LA, and you've invested in all of these startups locally, nationally, internationally. I know you have ties to France and have led investments throughout Europe. And so I'm curious, do you notice differences in how US and European startups approach their ESG footprint or how they pitch you?
No, what I would say is that in terms of companies that want to address sustainability issues, on both sides of the Atlantic, you see a lot of them. I mean, the US has a lot of startups in that space, more and more, and it affects almost every area, from energy supply to food security, as we talked about, and many other sectors like biomaterials for packaging, things to clean the ocean. I mean, there's an immense amount of startups on both sides. What I would say that's maybe a difference is I think that regular companies, other startups that are not in sustainability in Europe, and I mean mostly France because that's mostly where I find that every company has actually at least that in mind in terms of what's their footprint with, even if they're not in sustainability, like making sure that they have a neutral footprint and all this. I don't think it's as true here in the US. There are as many, if not more, companies going after the sector, but the companies that are not in the sector are not generally that focused on their footprint.
So what would
I don't think
be
the
your
sensitivity
advice?
of people is as high to it here as it is in Europe.
What would be your advice to US-based founders that are looking to pitch an idea to you? Should they really highlight that ESG piece?
I think it's coming for sure, even here. I'm just simply saying that if I look historically, last 5 years, if I took 100 companies we see, except for those that are focused on sustainability, I don't often hear the message necessarily, oh, we've calculated our footprint and we're made sure that this would happen and that would happen, and not as much. So I don't know. I don't think, and maybe the other side of it is that I don't think that the US investors are necessarily looking at it in terms of, oh, if you don't show me your efforts to reduce your footprint, I'm not investing. I don't think we are in that mode yet. It's starting to happen in the public markets. If you look at BlackRock, for instance, which is the largest investor in the world, they have said very clearly that they won't invest anymore in public companies that don't have an ESG mandate. So I think it is starting to come in, and that's probably where it will be the most effective, is arriving at a point where founders and everybody look at it as more something that they absolutely have to do, and if they don't do it, they might not get a lot of interest, from investors. That's probably the most effective way of it happening.
Actually, interesting that you bring up BlackRock, because I want to segue into talking about cryptocurrencies. When we were chatting earlier, you mentioned some very sort of shocking statistics on the carbon footprint of mining Bitcoin. And thinking about BlackRock, I think this is an interesting example, because they're sort of dipping their toes into the crypto space, while at the same time emphasizing how important ESG is in the DNA of a company. And so when we had talked, you had brought it up in the context of the rise amongst millennials in investing in Bitcoin and the paradox there. And so I hope that you can share a little bit more.
Yeah, what I would say there is nothing unique to me or anything or an analysis. Actually, Bill Gates 2 weeks ago spoke about it, essentially saying, yes, I know that some miners are going to be using renewable energy near a dam in China or something like this. Yes, but that's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is that renewable energy would have been used for something else. So the fact of saying I'm going to use some renewable energy for Bitcoin is kind of not really the issue. The issue is that we're not 100% renewable in the world. So whatever renewable energy is used should be used for other purposes. And Bitcoin requires so much energy. And last year the total amount of energy used in production of Bitcoin was about the size of Argentina, the Argentine energy consumption. And if you think about the future, actually, the way that Bitcoin works is that the mining becomes more and more complex with time, and therefore required more and more energy. As there are only 3 million Bitcoins left to mine, you could say that in the end, it will use an infinite amount of energy to mine the last Bitcoin. You see what I'm saying? It's a scale. And so the question really is, do we want to have a currency or a commodity, whatever you want to call Bitcoin? There's a debate about whether it's a currency, a commodity, or something like a storage of value. But is there is a contradiction of saying, okay, this is probably almost the single-handed, industry in which that is consuming vast amount of energy, where if you really think about it, why would it need to do that? I mean, other currency don't need that energy to be printed or produced. This one is particularly things. Now, sure, when you mine gold or other metals, you do also consume energy. So maybe there's an analogy there. But no, the contradiction for me was that whether it's BlackRock or millennials who care a lot about ESG, and yet they're kind of very focused on storing their assets, in a sense, in cryptocurrencies. And there is a little bit of a contradiction there, in a sense. And what I'm saying is nothing to do whether Bitcoin has a future or not, whether it's going to be what people say. And I was yesterday with some Bitcoin specialist who thinks that within 5 years, it'll be at $2 million a coin, whatever, which would be, almost as much as the dollar money supply in the world.
Well, we'll have to see. But in the meantime, I guess we just encourage all of you to be more conscious, where you put your dollars, and, thinking about the sort of impact of crypto in terms of the carbon footprint is something that, I at least and other folks I've talked to don't always keep front of mind. So I'm glad that you mentioned it. So I do want to pull some questions from our audience. I see one from An Lee, who's asking, what are some of the lessons that you can share about scaling sustainable businesses globally?
About what you said? About failing?
About scaling sustainable
okay.
businesses globally, or maybe failing along the way.
No. I misunderstood what you said. So scaling globally. Well, listen, I think scaling globally is always a difficult thing to do, whatever you're selling. But listen, the issue is that when you want to scale globally, it requires a lot of capital. It's just not something you can do that easily, without major amount of capital. So I think the trick, and that's essentially what I'm trying to find, if you like, in when I look at sustainability is, okay, Apeel, we seeded it was like $200,000 for research. Now, the path between that and being global is an immense path with lots of obstacles and difficulties, and making sure the technology works in every sort of location. You have to open subsidiaries around the world. You have to, in our case at Apeel, for instance, install equipment at various suppliers around the world, that supply supermarkets and all this. So it's very challenging. And for Apeel, as a result, if you think about how much they've raised, like it's around $400 million. The reason for that is because, we could have built a local profitable business, but in order to go global, we have to manufacture and install hundreds of machinery to treat the fruits and vegetables in warehouses around the world, and you can't do it halfway. If you're going to serve a large supermarket, like in the US, we're rolling out nationally with Kroger, the largest supermarket chain in the United States. So every region has different suppliers of their network, of their stores. Every region has a different supplier in this category, in that category. We have to integrate with the suppliers. I mean, it's a very complex business. And it becomes even more complex if you go global. And that requires great management team, great people, lots of capital in order to do that. And the fortunate part of it, as I think, is that these days, again, is sustainability. If people can see the picture down the road, big investors are willing to come in, as GIC did or IFC did in Apeel, and fund that. And actually, they're attracted, or IFC attracted to the global nature of what we do. They wouldn't come if it wasn't global, right? I mean,
right.
If you take IFC, for instance, their whole mandate is around emerging markets and all this, and they came to us. We'll put money with you, but we want you to do this and this and this for the emerging markets and to help not only in the industrialized world but in other countries.
Yeah, well, and this might be a good segue to the next question on the list, which is, do you measure the CO2 impact of your investments? Is that something that, the IFC or, Gates Foundation looked at before they made investments in Apeel or some of your other portfolio companies?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides to this, right? There's what is the ESG impact of the company, of what they do, meaning that take Apeel, for instance, if you can reduce waste in fruits and vegetables, let's say, I'll pick a number, by 10%, and we think we can do better than that, but let's say you reduce it by 10%, the positive ESG impact of that is massive. On the consumption of water in agriculture, on everything, it has a absolutely massive impact. Whether do we look at the company itself? Let's say Apeel has 500 employees. Look at it in Santa Barbara. They have offices in Holland, offices in things, and in their everyday life, are they measuring every single thing they do? Yes, I think Apeel, for instance, tries as much as possible to look at doing things in a way that does not have a large carbon footprint. And actually, Ÿnsect in Paris, even more. We have actually a measuring system for everything Ÿnsect does. And every board meeting, for instance, the first slide is Ŷnsect's ESG footprint. Not talking about the value of the proteins that they're sending and whether that has a positive ESG, impact. But and it certainly does. Breeding insect is much less of an ESG negative footprint than fishing, for instance.
I'll add an addendum to that question. For the startups that aren't specifically focused on sustainability in your portfolio, do you encourage the other portfolio companies to also report ESG impact metrics to you as an investor?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's not in any huge formal way. It's more of a commitment in a sense. Like we do the same for diversity, for instance. We have a clause in our term sheets that we will invest in companies, and they have to pledge that for every recruitment they will make, they will have to have a pool of candidates that include all genders or races and all this. And so we do that, and something a bit similar on ESG. It's more of a, it's not like we're not going to invest in you if you don't do that, but it's more, we would like you to do this. And the thing is that there are tools that are starting to emerge, because that's the other issue, is that there are some tools that are now available outside that help you measure that ESG. Because for a startup to do it on their own without really knowing where to go and how to do it is not that simple. Mm-hmm. So there are now a couple of companies that do that.
Yep, you're right. There's still a lot of room to grow when it comes to standardizing the metrics.
Exactly, and measuring and knowing what to measure. You know what I'm saying? Not every startup, let's say startup in software, they have no idea how to look at that,
So I noticed an interesting question that came through. I think we're going to go back to cryptocurrencies. So we have a question about NFTs, so non-fungible tokens.
Yeah.
And do you think it has a serious future, or if it's just a temporary trend? And so for folks in the audience who may not have caught the headlines on NFTs, so they're basically a digital asset where your ownership is recorded on a blockchain. So basically, it's a publicly accessible record of who owns this thing. And in this case, I think we're talking about digital collectibles. So I think Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter and Square, sold his first tweet for something like $3 million recently in a digital piece of art sold for, I think, $70 million at a Christie's auction. And so, a lot of people are kind of rushing into this. So what is your take on it?
Well, first of all, I'm going to have a disclaimer here. First disclaimer, I'm not a crypto or blockchain specialist. And actually, I don't make investments with our fund in those, not because it's not good, it's just not something that we do. And actually, in general, I would suggest that most crypto investors tend to be specialized in crypto. And I don't see a lot of generalists who include crypto in their investment, but there are some, and also it depends what you do. Like Unisquare Ventures, they did Coinbase, but Coinbase is more of a trading platform for crypto. So it's not, it's a bit different than investing in crypto, but it serves certainly the crypto market in a big way. So I don't know. I mean, I know, just like you described, I know what an NFT is. I know about the craze and the $69 million Christie's auction, a few weeks ago, although it seems the buyer was one of the big crypto guys anyway. So I don't know how real the purchase was. Like everything, you have this, it becomes a fad. Eventually, it becomes really something that is used in the future. So, right now it's for digital goods, right? There's a lot of discussions about the fact that NFTs could also cover physical goods, like, let's say, a piece of art, where you would associate a token with that piece of art, even if it's physical. Whereas right now, obviously, the NFTs are unique digital creations, or recording some events like the first Twitter, the first tweet from Jack Dorsey. But so I think that it will be something. There's another thing that's happening also, and we are involved in it in some respect with one of our companies, is that there's a lot of interest in buying, selling collectibles, and in the younger generation, it's even more true. I mean, in the whole collectible side, I mean, we have a company called Rally that takes collectible assets public. So almost like if you take a company public, you take a collectible car public, you take a baseball card public for millions of dollars, and then people can buy shares of it as opposed to not being able to own any of it because of how expensive it is, the product is. But I think going back to crypto, and to NFTs, I think that NFTs will probably play a big role in the collectibles market. I think it's pretty well suited for that. If you go beyond I'm going to sell for $3 million an old tweet, I don't know how sustainable that is, but there's a lot of other unique, and that's what it's non-fungible, and so unique assets that would serve well. I think the collectible market is just well suited for NFTs.
Great, thank you, and thanks for that question, Jason. So, I guess we've learned today that, if you're working on a solution that's sustainable, that is scalable, that is good for our planet, go to Yves at Upfront Ventures. If you're working on something involving cryptocurrencies, maybe go to a different firm. But I think we've had a really interesting conversation around just the carbon footprint of investments in general from your long track record of experience investing. And so we thank you for sharing those insights with us. And again, thank you for the generous donation to Sneha. And again, just a reminder to everyone to support our amazing organization if you've been moved during this webinar to give. And we also just encourage you to register for the next Epic Chat. Speaking of robotics and Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man, our next speaker is actually going to be Cher Huang, who's the co-founder and CEO at Boxed. And we're going to be chatting about warehouse automation and also how he came up with the idea to pay for his employees' college tuition out of his own pocket. So that'll be an interesting chat. So please join us for that. And then one of the main goals at Epic is really to create a community for all of you. So for founders, for investors, for change makers who really want to make a difference in the lives of disadvantaged children and youth. We often hear that you don't have the time or you don't have the money today, which is why we created the Epic Pledge, so you can share your future wins. So if I can ask for one favor today, please stay an extra minute after we close. You'll automatically be transported to our snazzy Super Bowl commercial to learn a little bit more about the Epic Pledge, or you can simply reach out to us at epicpledge@epic.foundation. So with that, thank you again, Yves, and see you all next time.
All right.